Who is William James? William James was a 19th century philosopher and psychologist who is widely regarded as the founder of American philosophy.
William James was born on January 11, 1842 at the Astor House in New York City. He was born into a wealthy, intellectual family where he was the oldest of 5 children. Earlier in school, William James expressed an interest in art and wanted to pursue painting. James then abandoned art to pursue science after studying painting with William Morris Hunt for a year. In 1861, James studied chemistry and psychology at Law Scientific School at Harvard University. Fast forward to 1863, he studied medicine at Harvard Medical School. In 1867, he spent his time in Germany to recover from illness such as severe depression, sight problems, and back pain. During his stay, James developed an interest in studying the mind as well as the body. William James completed his medical degree in 1869, but he never practiced medicine and instead became a philosophy and psychology professor at this school. He continued to teach psychology until his retirement in 1907.
William James's theoretical approach. Heavily influenced by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, William James thought that humans change and adapt to their environment, including their mind and behavior. This concept came to be functionalism because it's based on the function of a behavior and that it has to have an adaptive significance to help survive and pass on the behavior to the next generation. This school of thought focused on understanding the biological processes behind and purpose of human consciousness and behavior, rather than the inner workings of thinking. For example, a supermarket. While structuralism tried to understand the individual parts of going to the supermarket, such as leaving your house, walking to the store, choosing ingredients, paying, etc., functionalism tackled the root of why we even go to the store in the first place, because we need food for survival. Functionalism was important in the development of psychology because it broadened the scope of psychological research and application. Furthermore, functionalists introduced a wide variety of research techniques that were beyond the boundaries of structural psychology, like physiological measures, mental tests, and questionnaires. The problem with functionalism was that it was difficult to measure and didn't consider human behavior that does not appear to have any systematic origin. Other than the fact that he taught one of the first courses in psychology, established the first experimental demonstration laboratory, and wrote the first psychology textbook, he also came up with theories that later became significant to psychology. They are the James Lange theory and the theory of self. The James Lange theory of emotion. Believing in the connection between mind and body led him to develop the James Lange theory of emotion with Carl Lange. The theory suggests that an event triggers a physiological reaction which we interpret to develop emotions. To experience emotion, we must go through a series of steps. 1. Perception of stimuli or situation. 2. Bodily changes result from the perception of a situation. And 3. Recognition of the bodily changes produce subjective feelings or emotions. For example, if you run into a snake, your heart rate increases. James Lange theory suggests that the increase in heart rate is what makes us realize we're afraid. However, it received criticisms from many psychologists. Some argued that an increased heart rate could suggest fear, excitement, anger, or another emotion. The emotions are different, but the physical response is the same, so how are we supposed to interpret our bodily response? Theory of self. James theorized the components of the self, dividing them into 2 categories, me and I. Me is the experience of the self. It refers to describing the person's personal experiences. It is the empirical self. It is divided into further categories. Material self is consisting of one's body, family relations, and possessions. Social self is oneself as viewed by others, in which actions, thoughts, mannerisms, and emotions change in different social situations. For example, behavior with colleagues versus with friends. And lastly, spiritual self, our core identity such as personality, values, and conscience. I concerns the existence of the self. It refers to the self that knows who they are and what they have accomplished in life. It is a thinking, acting, and feeling self, allowing us to view ourselves to have an individual identity. Everything in our mind is the I self. It reflects the soul of the person, or what is now thought of as the mind, and is called the pure ego. For example, In the statement, I know it was me who ate the cookie, the me is the empirical self, the one who does the acting, whereas the I is the self that is capable of thinking and reflecting. This is significant because it helps them define who they think they are and how they fit into the world.
Although William James is credited with founding the first American psychology laboratory, he wasn't very fond of experimental work. However, he was so invested on the topic of dizziness due to his seasickness, it inspired him to conduct an experiment on the function of our inner ear. James was well educated on the previous studies and experiments conducted by other researchers before him regarding dizziness and vertigo. Based on his knowledge, he believed that the function of the semicircular canals of the internal ear have nothing to do with hearing, but are organs of a special sense. He claims that if that were true, deaf mutes with damage to their inner ear might not be susceptible to vertigo. To test his hypothesis, he created a study of dizziness in Harvard with students, instructors, and deaf individuals. He made the participants close their eyes while spinning on a swing. Then, the participants were asked to open their eyes and try to walk in a straight line. Of the 200 students, only one reported not experiencing dizziness, but of the 519 deaf participants, the majority reported only slight dizziness or none at all. Aside from his experiments, he also asked a number of deaf individuals about their experience with seasickness. Most reported that they didn't suffer from the condition at all.